On October 7, 2025, President Donald Trump stood in the White House briefing room and delivered a message that sent shockwaves across the nation. His administration plans to eliminate numerous federal programs and cut government jobs as a direct result of the ongoing government shutdown. What began as a political standoff over budget disagreements has now escalated into a full-scale restructuring of the federal government, one that could permanently reshape how America governs itself. The current shutdown was triggered when the Senate failed to pass a funding bill for fiscal year 2026. With Republicans controlling both the House and Senate and the White House, they expected smooth passage of their proposed budget. But Democrats, demanding the restoration of Medicaid cuts and an extension of Affordable Care Act subsidies, blocked the measure. In response, Trump has not only refused to compromise, he has turned the crisis into an opportunity. Rather than viewing the shutdown as a failure, Trump sees it as a strategic opening. He has repeatedly called it an unprecedented opportunity to dismantle what he describes as wasteful, bloated, and politically biased federal agencies. A lot of good can come down from shutdowns, Trump said last week, suggesting that eliminating programs long protected by Democratic lawmakers would ultimately benefit the American people. This is not the first U.S. government shutdown, but it may be the most consequential. Unlike past shutdowns, which were typically short-lived and resolved through last-minute negotiations, this one is being used as a weapon to advance a sweeping ideological agenda. The White House has already canceled $8 billion in federal energy financing, a move that appears targeted at Democratic-led states but has also affected Republican-held districts in competitive races. Trump's rhetoric has grown increasingly aggressive. He labeled Democrats' actions a kamikaze attack, accusing them of insurrectionist behavior for blocking the funding bill. Yet rather than seeking reconciliation, he has doubled down, threatening mass layoffs and declaring that some furloughed workers didn't deserve back pay. The stakes could not be higher. Approximately 750,000 federal employees are on unpaid leave. National parks are closed, airport operations are disrupted, and critical programs like WIC, Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, face imminent funding shortages. Yet in a surprising twist, the White House claims it will keep WIC running by redirecting revenue from Section 232 tariffs, essentially using trade penalties to fund social services. What makes this moment unique is not just the scale of disruption, but the deliberate intent behind it. Previous shutdowns were accidents of political gridlock. This one feels engineered, a calculated effort to shrink the size of government, weaken federal institutions, and shift power toward the executive branch. At the center of this unfolding crisis is President Donald Trump, now serving his second term after winning re-election in 2024. Known for his disruptive style of governance, Trump has long promised to drain the swamp in Washington. Now, he appears to be making good on that pledge, not through legislation, but through executive action enabled by the shutdown. Supporting him is Russell T. Vought, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, a key architect of Trump's deregulatory and anti-bureaucracy agenda. Vought has already announced the suspension of federal funding for cities and states governed by Democrats, including New York City and Chicago, framing these decisions as necessary fiscal corrections. On the other side are Democratic leaders like Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who have refused to back down despite the mounting consequences of the shutdown. They argue that Trump's budget cuts disproportionately harm vulnerable populations and undermine essential services. Jeffries has not spoken directly with the president since Monday, signaling a breakdown in communication at the highest levels. The what of this crisis is twofold. First, the immediate suspension of government functions due to lack of funding. Second, the long-term restructuring of federal programs and workforce. Trump has signaled that some cuts will be permanent, targeting what he calls Democrat agencies, a term he uses to describe departments or initiatives perceived as politically aligned with liberal policies. Among the programs at risk are environmental grants, scientific research funding, and social welfare initiatives. The $8 billion in canceled energy financing alone could delay clean energy projects nationwide, affecting everything from solar farms to electric vehicle infrastructure. But perhaps the most controversial aspect is the threat to federal jobs. While past shutdowns resulted in temporary furloughs with eventual back pay, Trump has suggested that some workers may not receive compensation and that some positions may never be restored. This marks a significant departure from precedent and raises concerns about the stability of the federal workforce. The current government shutdown began at midnight on October 1, 2025,
after the Senate rejected the Republican funding bill by a vote of 55 to 45, 5 votes short of the 60 needed to overcome a filibuster. Since then, non-essential federal operations have been suspended, and agencies have implemented emergency protocols. October 1st, shutdown begins. Federal workers receive furlough notices. October 2nd, Trump calls for clearing out deadwood federal employees on Truth Social, signaling aggressive cuts. October 6th, White House announces cancellation of $8 billion in energy funding, citing budget constraints. October 7th, Trump confirms plans to eliminate programs and cut jobs, promising details within days. The primary location of this political drama is Washington, D.C., specifically the White House, Capitol Hill, and federal agency headquarters. The Oval Office has become the nerve center of Trump's strategy, where he meets with advisors like Vought to determine which programs to target. The Senate floor and House chambers are battlegrounds where the fate of the budget is being contested. But the impact is felt far beyond the Capitol. Cities like New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, home to major federal offices and contractors, are experiencing economic ripple effects. Rural communities dependent on USDA nutrition programs face uncertainty as WIC funding teeters on the edge. Airports across the country report staffing shortages as TSA workers go unpaid. National parks, from Yellowstone to the Grand Canyon, remain closed, hurting local tourism economies. Research labs funded by the National Institutes of Health have paused experiments, potentially delaying medical breakthroughs.
Why is Trump taking such a hardline approach? His reasoning, as stated publicly, is threefold: fiscal responsibility, political retribution, and ideological transformation. First, Trump claims the shutdown allows him to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse in government spending, saving billions and billions of dollars. He argues that many federal programs have outlived their purpose and that the crisis provides cover to make deep, lasting cuts. Second, there is a clear political dimension. By targeting programs popular in Democratic states, such as urban transit grants or climate resilience funding, Trump aims to weaken his opponent's support base. As one White House official put it, this is a chance to cut favorite projects of Democratic lawmakers, possibly for good. Third, this aligns with a broader conservative vision of reducing the size and scope of the federal government. Think tanks like the Heritage Foundation have long advocated for such a restructuring, and Trump appears to be implementing a version of their agenda through crisis management. The how involves a mix of executive authority, budgetary manipulation, and public messaging. The OMB, under Vought, is identifying programs that can be suspended or terminated without congressional approval. Tariff revenues are being redirected to fund essential services like WIC, creating a self-justifying cycle. Trade penalties fund social programs, allowing further cuts elsewhere. Trump is also using media strategically, holding press conferences with foreign leaders like Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney to project strength and control, even as domestic chaos mounts. Reactions to Trump's actions have been sharply divided. Republicans in safe districts largely support the president, echoing his view that the shutdown is a necessary tool for reform. But GOP lawmakers in competitive districts, such as Mike Lawler in New York and David Valadao in California, are alarmed, as their constituents face real hardship from canceled projects and lost services. Democrats have condemned the cuts as cruel and politically motivated. "The Democrats are so cruel," retorted White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, flipping the script by blaming the opposition for endangering programs like WIC. "The human impact is already visible. Families unsure if they can afford baby formula, small businesses losing federal contracts, scientists watching years of research stall. Economists warn that prolonged shutdowns reduce GDP growth and damage investor confidence. In the long term, this crisis could redefine the balance of power between the executive and legislative branches. If Trump succeeds in making permanent cuts without congressional approval, it sets a precedent that future presidents of any party may follow."